Hello. Professor Kumar Giri from Madras Institute of Development Studies, Chennai, and Honorary Executive Trustee of the Snowden Center for Asian Blossoming. I would like to welcome Professor Gyan Gului, Niti Pradhanji, Dr. Tiwari, and all the respected participant viewers both on Zoom platform and Google Meet platform. Uh, uh, Let me give a kind of brief introduction to our SOHSS Chakra. SOHSS Chakra, Co-Learning Circles of Self and Mutual Studies, is an initiative of studying and learning together self, culture, societies, and the world. Friends associated with this are eager to walk and mediate with new horizons of thinking and new movements of social and cultural change at work in our contemporary world. We study seekers such as Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Chitranjan Das, a creative thinker from Odisha, and many others from around the world. We also present our own writings and reflect upon our creativity together. We also invite seekers from different fields of life to share with us their life's vision, sadhana, and struggle for creating a world of beauty, dignity, and dialogue. We meet every Sunday or sometimes on Wednesday. We are now nurturing this collaborated efforts with the School of Humanities and Social Science of Raffles University. And uh, many of you must have known Professor Giri, but some of you were the first listener. Let me give a kind of brief introduction. Professor Anant Kumar Giri teaches in Madras Institute of Development Studies, Chennai. His area research interest includes new horizons of human development and social transformation in India, and the world dialogues, dignity and responsibility, religion, spiritual mobilization, and social transformation. He has a deep understanding of social movement and social theory, criticism, creativity, and contemporary dialectics of transformation. Today is a very special topic, and the topic that is chosen by Professor Giri himself is very, very important because dialogues are essential method of transformational knowledge. Philosophy itself can only be understood as interplay or dialogue. Dialogue uh, as a means of collective communication, it always helps us to offer cross-disciplinary approach to examining and understanding the world. Plato to Socrates, Wallerstein to Martin Buber. Buber, for instance, suggests the real life begins with two individuals engaged in dialogue. In this spirit of dialogue includes such a diverse subject as the nature of religious faith today, global ecological terrorism, religious fantasism, and universal human rights. So, without further ado, I would like to invite our honorable speaker to kindly deliver his talk on the very topic towards a new pragmatics and hermeneutics of creativity and calling of transcivilizational dialogues and planetary conversations.
Thank you so much, dear Randhir, and a warm welcome to all our friends co-present this evening. And this is our first journey of togetherness in our 2022, as we have embraced our departing year 2021, and as we embrace 2022, which is unfolding with us. And we are grateful to each other, to divine and nature, that we have been able to continue our journey almost without any break. And this year, 2022, also becomes a year of our resolve to be together, to explore together, to learn together. And this way, we prepare ourselves to be a more perfect, a more prepared instrument of the divine and nature of knowledge that is working with us and that is waiting to be manifested with us. So, today I wish to discuss the challenge of discipline, interdisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity. So, we are familiar with the discipline of disciplines. Now, what is the meaning of discipline? That we become disciplined. Okay, how do we become disciplined? We become disciplined, develop practice of discipline, and we develop the practice of discipline with our self-control and with sadhana. For example, if one is a musician, that every musician, if we read the autobiography of the musical seekers, I read one such, a great musical master from Karnataka. So he would practice it every day. Similarly, those of us who are in a discipline, for example, sociology or anthropology or medicine, that it becomes our way of life. As a musician performs the riyaz every day, so we workers in discipline, we also practice it, and pragmatics come from that. So we practice our discipline, but when we practice our discipline, the very practice itself brings us in communication with other disciplines. For example, as a student of sociology, when we are practicing our discipline, sociology. Now, sociology inevitably brings us to other related fields. For example, philosophy. And here we may remember that much of knowledge began with philosophy. Even science, we must not forget, some time ago, not so long ago, was part of natural philosophy. Therefore, the great scientists were also deep philosophers. For example, Isaac Newton and others, Descartes, and so philosophy and science, they they worked together, and most of science was part of philosophy. And when knowledge branched, for example, now look at economics. Adam Smith is one of the founders of modern economics. He wrote this work, Wealth of Nations, but his position at University of Glasgow, which I have visited a few times, including in 2007. So his position was professor of moral philosophy. And when he wrote this work, Wealth of Nations, he also wrote a book called A Theory of Moral Sentiments. Similarly, let us look at Karl Marx. Karl Marx studied philosophy. He didn't study economics. And he came to economics with philosophy. At the same time, he is considered one of the father of modern economics. So the point is that the disciplines which have emerged in the modern world, in its early phase, in economics, in sociology, for example, Marx is one of the founders of sociology. Similarly, Max Weber, Emile Durkheim. Now, all these pioneering practitioners of discipline, they always came out of a very interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary communication. There is a distinction between interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity. In interdisciplinarity, I come from sociology and you come from economics. We maintain our distance, as for example, in intercaste marriage. Now, in intercaste marriage, now one boy or one girl comes from a caste and they get married. But there is very little transmutation of caste there. And no wonder intercaste marriage is accompanied by violence because there is no fundamental transformation in caste consciousness. I am a Brahmin or I am a Dalit and you are a Brahmin. We just happen to get married. But nothing much happens in the structure of caste. Now, interdisciplinarity most of the time works like that. You are a sociologist, I am an economist, I am comfortable, I am self assured in my sense of discipline that this is the most important thing on the world. There is no change in that. But unless we realize, unless we empty ourselves, I might be trained as a sociologist, but sociology is not the world. The world is not sociological because I am trained as a sociologist. But the fundamental fallacy of the disciplines is it is also a bit like love. Now we think that because I am loved by a person and because this person thinks that I am the most important person in the world, therefore I continue to think that I am the most important person in the world. But is it true? Similarly, the condition of discipline is like that. So, just one moment. ଆଜ୍ଞା ପ୍ରଣାମ ଆଜ୍ଞା ନମସ୍ତେ କାଲି ଭେଟିବା ପ୍ଲିଜ୍ କାଲି ଭେଟିବା ଶୁଭରାତ୍ରି ନମସ୍ତେ ଆଜ୍ଞା ସୋ ଆଜ୍ଞା ଅଛି ହଁ ଆଉ ଟିକେ ଯଦି ଆଣିଦେବେ ଜଷ୍ଟ ଟୁ ବି ଅନ୍ ଦି ସେଫ୍ ସାଇଡ୍ ଆଜ୍ଞା ହଁ so dear friends, so similarly discipline, now I am trained as a discipline, but because I am trained as a discipline, the world is not disciplined constituted. Now this awakening, this awareness moves us from our disciplinary identity to our familiar logic of interdisciplinarity, which is an inadequate logic, and it calls for transdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinarity means that when we are part of a field, many disciplines are there. As students of sociology, we realize that sociology is intimately connected to psychology, isn't it? And a field like social psychology embodies this. Philosophy, psychology, history, all is intertwined. And the subject that we study, that subject determines the nature of transdisciplinarity we would have to bring. Suppose we are studying a problem like, say, child marriage. Now, it would have a particular configuration of transdisciplinarity. Now, because I study a discipline, that does not mean that my disciplinary perspective has to be the sovereign perspective, the absolute perspective. And moreover, the perspective that is there in a discipline, for example, sociology. Sociology emphasizes the significance of social structure, the societal, among many things. But that significance of social structure, now it is coming from sociology, but that is meant to be universalized. For example, when we are studying economics, even while doing economics with cost benefit analysis or rational choice, we can bring the perspective of social structure to interact with our disciplinary perspectives. So at that moment, our disciplinary perspectives, which we begin and we think that this is the unique perspective of the discipline, but that becomes universalized. That means the unique perspective of a discipline For example, the significance of social structure in sociology or in anthropology. One unique aspect of anthropology is listening to human voice. Now, in sociology, much attention is to social structure, and in anthropology, of course, there is structure of anthropology. But very unique about anthropology is our ability to sit by a person and to listen to a human voice, culture and voice. But the listening to a voice that is emphasized in anthropology, it is meant to be universalized. That means that even in sociology, we must listen to human voice. And I think I was making a presentation the other day, and I was discussing about listening, and I was saying that how much of our disciplines they have grown with the modernist emphasis on observation, but we have not developed the capacity to listen. And then this person commented, oh, then we must develop. Thank you. So we must develop a listening sociology. So again, when we develop a listening sociology or a listening discipline, then that listening practice also becomes transdisciplinary. That means how do we listen? So then we would have to see that how the birds listen to each other, how a musician listens to each other. So all these things have to be developed. Therefore, there is two meaning of discipline. One is discipline as control. That means you are a sociologist, then you would have to be sociologist at every moment. Even at 4 o'clock in the night, when you are looking at a dream, isn't it? Now, at that moment, do you have to be a sociologist? Not necessarily, even if you are a sociologist. So, another meaning of discipline is sadhana, and that sadhana requires practice, and that is the pragmatics. And I am bringing that idea of a new pragmatics of transdisciplinarity. And that pragmatics is practice that we are doing these activities. But while doing these activities, we also have a, a kind of sadhana, and that activity has a deeper dimension. And what I am developing this paper, which I would be able to share with you after 1 or 2 weeks, because I have been on the road mostly for the last 1 month or so. So this paper is also developing slowly and slowly. Now, so therefore, a new pragmatics of transdisciplinarity, what I just attribute, that disciplines that we are, that we would have to communicate with each other. And that is called pragmatics of communication. That means it is a practice, like when we are meeting together. Now, all our universities, we have several disciplines. Now, a school is meant to have sister disciplines, like School of Social Sciences in JNU, which includes philosophy and Center for Study of Social Systems, Center for Media Studies, Historical Studies. Now, because they are part of a school, because they need to interact with each other, communicate with each other. And in a university like JNU, so we find that there is an easy flow of communication. When there is a seminar in Center for Social Systems, historians and others, they come in, they just jump in. But this is not the situation in many universities where I have visited. And because you are studying in psychology department, very rarely in Indian universities, when I visit a university, if the lecture is hosted by one department, I never see any other person, even a bird, or even a mongrel, or a mosquito, or a mouse from another department, what to speak of human beings. Now, this is not the pragmatics of transdisciplinary communication. So, towards a new pragmatics of transdisciplinarity means that we would have to initiate practices of communication among ourselves. Pragmatics of communication is a very important theme which has been emphasized by Jürgen Habermas in his work on communication. I built on that, pragmatics of communication. But this pragmatics of communication also has a spiritual dimension, which is not enough explored by Jürgen Habermas. And but now we need to develop that. Therefore, this pragmatics of uh, transdisciplinary communication, when it is accompanied by a spiritual perspective, it will help us to realize, first of all, that all the disciplines that are with us, they are all part of our ways of knowing. Therefore, we are not in competition with each other. Psychology is one aspect of understanding the human condition. Sociology is one aspect, and they have differential emphasis. But differential emphasis does not mean that we are competing with each other. So that sense that he sociology is not my enemy or anthropology is not my enemy, and I always have to, because for job opportunity, all these external conditions, I always have to belittle other disciplines. Now this kind of attitude, we would have to transform our attitude of indifference and enmity to one of acknowledgement, mutual acknowledgement, and that is a spiritual perspective. Now, another part of pragmatics of communication is that when we are communicating with each other, then we would have to understand the beauty in each other. As we are meeting, when we are meeting two friends or many friends, now if we do not perceive, realize the beauty that each one of us are bringing to our occasion, I am sure many of us are still going through the celebration of togetherness with the new year as it is unfolding. Now, that moment of togetherness is a moment of acknowledgement of beauty. It's beauty in each one of us. But if I started considering the other person as ugly, that moment of togetherness is not able to realize itself. Now, the great philosopher John Dewey talks about the whole, he talks about the aesthetics of public intelligence. That means when we are meeting together, that public intelligence has an aesthetic dimension. And similarly, I wish to bring that perspective that in transdisciplinary communication, we would have to bring the perspective of aesthetic ecology of public intelligence. And aesthetic, a sense of aesthetics. Aesthetics becomes a way of communicating with each other, which takes us away from the rigidity of self-centeredness. And so aesthetics, joy, and also like dance, for example. So once we think of dancing with disciplines, not just becoming a slave of disciplines, dance with disciplines. I am trained as a sociologist, but I dance with sociology. As sociology makes me dance. So when I dance with sociology, then I also dance with other disciplines. So aesthetics becomes very important way of pragmatics of transdisciplinarity. So at this moment, let me quickly pull out the the PPT that I have prepared, on the road. Till yesterday, I was out of the world. My internet was, always, working with its own sense of, rest and blossoming. And today I am in this school in Keunjhar, and so let me bring this PPT by sharing it. I think you can see it, please. Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, just give me a moment, please. Yes. Just one moment. I'll quickly go through some of these. So now you can see the title, I'm sure, but somehow I cannot see myself, but that is all right. But you can see and hear,
Yes,
isn't
sir.
it? So I begin with this line from Savitri. A cosmic thought spreads out its vastitudes. Its smallest parts are here philosophies, challenging with their detailed immensity, each figuring an omniscient scheme of things, but higher still can climb the ascending light. So the implication for transdisciplinarity is that when we are with a thought in a discipline, we realize that there is a cosmic thought which is spreading out its vastitude with our discipline. Therefore, our disciplines are dances of the vastitude rather than just narrow fields of disciplinary identity and control. And then I write that how transdisciplinarity calls for a new pragmatics of communication among self and disciplines, in which cultivate a new vision of practice and pragmatism. Pragmatics has both an immanent and transcendental dimension, a pragmatic and a spiritual dimension. I propose new vision and practices of trans-pragmaticity, spiritual pragmatism and spiritual pragmatics to help us in our vision and practice of transdisciplinarity. And then transdisciplinarity also calls for a new hermeneutics of self-disciplines and society, going beyond the models of self and discipline presented to us by the state and academic systems. We need to move across multiple topoi of disciplines and practice, what can be called multi-topical hermeneutics. We also need to move across different times and temporality and practice multi-temporal hermeneutics. Here we can realize that in some times, such as in pre-modern world, some discipline practice a different art of knowledge generation, such as science being part of natural philosophy. Multi-temporal hermeneutics calls for creative and critical memory work and discovering hidden remnants for contemporary creative practice and envisioning of a new sadhana of mutual learning and transformation. Let me quickly explain what we mean. What I mean by multi-topical hermeneutics vis-a-vis disciplines. Now, I begin with a discipline like sociology. Then I move to another discipline, psychology or anthropology. Then I move from one discipline to the other. But when I am moving, I am not abandoning my discipline. And therefore, when as a sociologist I come to psychology, then I read psychological works and I interpret it. And that interpretation also becomes a point of coming together of insights of psychology and sociology. And when I come to philosophy, it becomes a occasion for a multi-topical hermeneutics of multiple disciplines. So very briefly, that is the idea of multi-topical hermeneutics, which I build on Raimundo Panikkar, the theologian, and Boaventura de Sousa Santos, the sociologist. And in my own work, I have developing it further, and in different of my essays, I bring the pathway of multi-topical hermeneutics. Therefore, this way of interpreting the world, it also is related to pragmatics, because only when I move from one discipline with the other, it's a pragmatic move. Because if I sit closed in one discipline, that would not happen. And what is multi-temporal hermeneutics is that now, say in 2022, I am studying sociology. Now, this this constitution of sociology in 2022 is not the same thing as when it was constituted 150 years ago and 100 years ago. 100 years ago, sociology was much more disciplinary constructed. But now all disciplines are becoming much more challenged, whether it is history or economics, you know. Now there is a kind of challenging of disciplinary exclusivity. But this challenging of disciplinary exclusivity, I realize its greater significance when I go back in time. For example, when doing economics now, studying economics, if I also work and meditate with Adam Smith, for example, how Adam Smith wrote Wealth of Nations and a theory of moral sentiments at the same time. Or when I look at a sociologist who also wrote a poem, For example, Marx was a philosopher, but if you study his, contributions to critics of political economy, the preface, it concludes with a very important line from Dante, the great Italian poet, Divine Comedy. So multi-temporal hermeneutics means that when we are interacting with disciplines, when we are moving from one discipline to the other, it is not just happening in our present day time. We go through the layers of time. We go to that layer of time when disciplines were much more fluid. And then if we have that realization, and that realization would help us to realize the multidisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity that is expected of us now. Then, transdisciplinarity also calls for a new realization of temporality, going beyond still modernistic privileging of bounded self and society. Our discussions of tradition, modern and postmodern, are still posited in an initial conflictual and dualistic opposition which affect our construction of subjects, objects, and disciplines. For example, you look at most of the disciplines, they are modernistic. And as in sociology, as both Ulrich Beck and Anthony Giddens would tell us, that sociology has to develop a post-traditional telos. But if sociology from the beginning considers that it is part of modernity and its only telos is post-traditional telos, but then how can it do justice to tradition also as a reality in the contemporary world? So therefore, building on the work of my dear friend from Poland, a great philosopher, Korab Karpovich, who developed this idea of dialogue among epochs. Now, Randhir in the beginning referred to the whole path of dialogue. Now, there is work on dialogue among civilizations, but we also need to have dialogue among epochs. For example, because we live in the contemporary world, which has been so much determined by the moment of modernity in history. But if we become only modernistic, then we cannot have dialogue, a worthy dialogue, a listening dialogue between tradition, modern, postmodern, and what is called as transmodern. According to Enric Dussel, our contemporary moment, Dussel is a great philosopher of Latin America. I have met him in 2010. Interestingly, in an interesting conference of crossing beyond boundaries, which is also has an interdisciplinary dialogue in Luxembourg. We had a very interesting moment together. And I have included an essay on transmodernity and transculturality in the book Research as a Realization that I have edited in 2017. Now, transmodern moment is that moment where we are building on both tradition, the modern and the postmodern. At the same time, we have our own creativity at this moment. We are not prisoners of the moment. And that kind of a hermeneutics is it is a multi-temporal hermeneutics because we are not just prisoner of the present. So moving on, I then discuss the relationship between transmodernity and transdisciplinarity because as the modern system has built disciplinary boundaries, the transmodern moment can create possibilities for transcending disciplinary boundaries, including creating a new system of knowledge production. And as reference was made to Immanuel Wallerstein, who wrote about modern world system, we should not forget the book that Wallerstein, Ilya Prigogine, Michael Rolf Trio, my teacher and a great anthropologist from Johns Hopkins and others They co-wrote a book called Open the Social Sciences. And what was the call? Many of us would have read that book. And what was the important call of that book is, now we must overcome the boundary between natural science and social sciences. And I was spending some time with students at Khandagiri Integral School maybe a week ago. And in a conversation with students, I also brought that thought. I asked them that when you are in the laboratory, have you ever thought of singing a song in the laboratory? Now, dear friends, now is it that that song is banished from the laboratory? No. So scientific work is also an artistic work. Now the instrument with which we are holding an instrument, and the love and care, that with the love and care with which we hold our loved one, our our person of love, the same love and care we also hold the instrument of science. So therefore, so one important calling of transdisciplinarity is that how do we overcome the division between science and natural science and realize that science is also part of the human endeavor. Science is as human as humanity is, and similarly, humanity also is part of science of life. And of course, we should not forget that there is a lot of work on science and spirituality. Then pragmatics of communication, as I have referred to, has a immanent dimension and a transcendental dimension. I'm just referring to a few points so that we have more time for discussion. Then here I'm bringing another idea from pragmatics of language, that is Wittgenstein, who talks about language as a form of life. And it is in the same way we can look at discipline as a form of life. But as a form of life, also can make us prisoner of a form of life, and that creates suffering. What I'm writing here, building on Stanley Cavell, the great philosopher, now any form of life can hide the spiritual struggle that is entailed in overcoming the prisons of disciplinary forms of life. For example, because I'm trained as a sociologist, if I start reducing the world to the sociological absolute, then it creates suffering. It creates suffering in my own life as a sociologist, and it creates problem for everybody, including the problem that I'm trying to address. But while Wittgenstein looks at language as a form of life, Martin Heidegger looks at it as a movement of life. Thus, disciplines are not only forms of life, but also movements of life. We can also look at cross-disciplinary communication as a movement of life, which also involves appropriate movements of consciousness. And this we need to remember, that the whole transdisciplinarity is not just a question of bringing one subject to the other, but it is a movement of consciousness. And thus, interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity are not just structural projects enabled by new structures and organizations of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. Rather, they call for cultivation of consciousness of self, others, disciplines, knowledge, and society. It also involves cognition and recognition, cognitive interest in disciplines as well as transdisciplinarity, as well as interest to recognize one's discipline as well as others' disciplines. This theme of cognition and recognition is a very important theme in critical sociology that I'm bringing here. But cognition is characterized by what Pete Stridham calls cognitive fluidity, which helps us flow across discipline rather than being rigidly bound to it. This can lead to what Binadas calls adjacent modes of thinking. That means when I'm sociologist and anthropologist, we are sitting together, then we would develop an adjacent mode of thinking. It is not just my disciplinary mode of thinking. Both cognition and recognition also have a meta dimension. For example, dimension of metacognition and meta recognition. This metacognitive dimension involves not only reason but also intuition. Intuition also helps in our transdisciplinary movement. Intuition is not solely confined to the individual, but can be cultivated as a culture. Transdisciplinarity calls for cultivation of cultures of intuition. Then I have discussed about the need for bringing pragmatics and spirituality together. Now I'm bringing an idea that when we are communicating with each other, now these disciplines, they create disciplinary commons. As we assemble together in transdisciplinary commons, it creates movements for solidarity. Being in the space of commons, in face of common challenges, disciplines realize their limitations, but they look at their limitations with compassion. Transdisciplinary commons creates condition in which disciplinary cells become transdisciplinary as disciplines become transdisciplinary disciplines. For example, sociology becomes a transdisciplinary discipline rather than just sociological monodisciplinary discipline. This generates conditions of well-being of disciplines in the place of ill-being and illness of disciplines. In Indic thought, the vision and practice of Lokasangraha tells us how coming together of people and soul, Lokasangraha and Atma Sangraha creates welfare and well-being for all. Gianni Vattimo, the great philosopher from Italy, tells us about the link between pragmatism, solidarity, and mercy or compassion. Here, he builds upon both pragmatism as well as Christian spiritual traditions. Here, we can also build on other traditions of mercy and compassion, such as Buddhist traditions of compassion and karuna. So, what I am saying here, that when discipline comes together, they create a transdisciplinary Lokasangraha and Atma Sangraha. And then I'm in this slide just elaborates that. Then I'm coming to another important idea of transcontextuality, because pragmatics deals with context. But when we are in context, we are not bound to context. We also move with context. Then I talk about transdisciplinarity and transpositional subject objectivity, which means that every discipline can be looked at as a kind of a subject, and it creates an objectivity. Like sociology as a subject creates a sociological objectivity which emphasizes structure and so on and so forth. But when sociology moves with psychology, for example, now its subject and objectivity is transformed by a transpositional movement, which I call as transpositional subject objectivity. I'm just hinting at a few things. I'm not elaborating it enough, and we can pick it up in discussion. And then I develop this idea again about transpositional subject to objectivity. Now here, then I come to the idea of that when we move from one position to the other, and that it creates a where that a position is far away. For example, we think that philosophy and let us say science are far away. But in the whole process of transpositional communication, as Edmund Husserl, the father of phenomenology, says, and as Jain Mohanty, the great philosopher, says, that in phenomenology, the real spirit is that the far is near and the near is far. And that is also spirit of love. When we love something, distance does not matter. Even, I have been traveling in this beautiful part of the world, and when I come out at 4 o'clock, even in the cold night, I look at star. But when you look at the star with love, you feel as if the star is sitting by your side. You feel as if the star is singing you a song. Similarly, you can also move to the star. I'm just giving you this example to bring home the idea of what Husserl and Mohanty is saying, that in a kind of in a self-aware phenomenology, the far is near and the near is far. I call it as transpositional phenomenology. So now I very quickly come to the question of disciplinarity and transcivilizational dialogues. Because most of the disciplines in the modern world, what is their civilizational source? It is modern civilization. As Gandhi tells us in his Hind Swaraj, modernity is modern civilization. Even the great sociologist Eisenstadt, S.N. Eisenstadt, he is talking about the civilization of modernity. But where does that civilization come from? It is a Euro-American civilization with Judeo-Christian root. Religious stream, it is Judeo-Christian, and philosophically. So now my screen, I'm concluding and I'm coming to my screen. And so what I'm saying is that it is Judeo-Christian in the terms of religious roots of modern civilization, and it is the Greek philosophy, But look at, for example, sociology. Now, sociology and political science, they emphasize on power. Power is a very important theme. But in Indic thought, in Bhagavad Gita, for example, that's the notion of Shraddha. It is written, Shraddha Maya Ayang Jagata Jojat Shraddha Sa Evasa. This person is animated by Shraddha, and a person is depending upon what one's Shraddha is, love and respect. So therefore, when we are engaging with sociology as a discipline and engaging with the theme of power, once we open it into transcivilizational dialogue and realization, we realize that the very engagement with power needs to also engage with the theme of love and respect. So, and similarly, we can take many themes. So that is the theme of transdisciplinarity and transcivilizational dialogue. And coming to planetary conversations, then this kind of dialogue, then it calls for us to move from where we are. Like now, we are part of a kind of flat world at one level, but at the same time, we come from our traditions of philosophies and thinking, and let us speak with each other. Let us be with each other, even in silence. And that is the horizontality of communication. But that horizontality also has a vertical dimension. And that vertical dimension is a dimension of depth and height. For example, when we are speaking together, now I must not feel ashamed to say that when we are dealing with power, let us also bring the theme of Shraddha. And that kind of conversation is a vertical communication, because I am not afraid that much of the sociologists would not understand it, because much of the sociology is suffering from a disease called post-traditional telos, where anything which seems traditional, for example, Bhagavad Gita, is considered only an apology of certain kind of unwanted traditional values. So, dear friends, so these are some of the thoughts that I wanted to submit to you for your consideration. And we might, with our mutual generosity, so we might spend a little more time in cultivating these thoughts together.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for giving a very thought-provoking lecture, and very, very insightful and deep. And transdisciplinary is the hallmark of today's intelligentsia. And that's a very, very important thing that we need to learn. So, dear and respected friend, if you have any question, so first I would like to invite Professor Gyan Gului to share his view.
Thank you. I am audible. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Audible. Thank you. Thank you. It was really very interesting, impressive, and of course I noted many points. I will limit my intervention so that I do not abuse of the time to only some points. Well, I would say that perhaps the idea of transdisciplinarity was always present, because, for instance, like in the case of Adam Smith, of wealth of nations, and of his theory of moral sentiment. But of course, not only in case of Adam Smith, I heard, for instance, the name of Dante, of our poet, for instance, also. And well, we could make many examples as discipline. I would say, for instance, theology, which has always been a discipline which has involved us or has been identified with many other disciplines. For instance, theology is not so simple to separate, at least in some epochs, area of philosophy from philosophy itself. That is, well, if I say Thomas Aquinas, who or what is Thomas Aquinas? Is a philosopher, is a theologian, is both of them? Perhaps it has no sense to make a distinction between many disciplines, at least in some epochs of the disciplines itself. And I would say yes, I think it is very positive that we speak now of transdisciplinarity because it is really necessary to have a certain, at least a certain transdisciplinary attitude when we analyze a problem. For instance, when we speak of economical questions in the contemporary world, and we take, for instance, in consideration, in account, the theories of Amartya Sen. Well, who is or what is Amartya Sen? He's a philosopher without any doubt. He's an economist without any doubt. He's a sociologist without any doubt also. He's also an historian. And in a certain sense, he's also a theologian because he knows very many things of the Indian cultural tradition, Indian cultural heritage, and not only of the Indian cultural heritage. Therefore, I think that really a transdisciplinary attitude and way of facing the questions of the contemporary world is really needed. It is indispensable. I would say that this should be done also as regards the past, because as in the case of the quote I mentioned, Adam Smith, but not only of him, we can always find that at least the great thinkers, Newton, of course, Dante, and many like them, they have always been thinkers whose thought is not so easy to be categorized. That is to say, they are this, or they are that, or they are that. It doesn't function. It doesn't function. That is, they are some, if perhaps it is so, if the thinker is really a huge thinker as regards the width of his thought, then he is not not simple to be categorized, to be assigned to a specific theme, but he is always more or less a transdisciplinary thinker, I would say so, and therefore I think it is very good to be to adopt a transdisciplinary way now, but and also trans dialogue between disciplines. But I would say that we have to make this always. It is also when we cope with a theme of the past or with a thinker of the past. In my opinion, there is really no option outside the transdisciplinarity. When I, for instance, have tried to make analysis or inquiries, and I've tried, or I was ordered, because it happens also in the universities, to concentrate myself only on an aspect, to not go to other aspects, to see, to consider the thinker only under one category, only one perspective, only under one discipline. The results of my research were not good. Were not for me at least were not satisfying at all. And so therefore I would say transdisciplinarity should be really a criterion and a measure in order to organize one's own research. So I would say so. Thank you very much. It was really very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gyanguli, for raising very important insights. Now, Dr. Tiwari,
Yes, sir, I'm there.
yes, please ask your question or share
Thank
your.
you so much, sir, for giving me the opportunity. And as far as this transdisciplinarity is concerned, it was well explained by our uh, generous speaker. Sir has very beautifully portrayed the connection between the subjects, and there is a need to have a desire, to have a feeling to go for transdisciplinarity. Particularly in present context, I would like to highlight that new education policy uh, of India has kept a provision that transdisciplinary education should be promoted. Means a student of science can have an opportunity to study literature. It is because those days during time of Plato, Aristotle, or Socrates, only learned persons were those who were having knowledge of all the subjects. At present context, say for example, I'm doctorate in English literature, so I consider myself as an expert of one subject, but I don't know mathematics. So there is an urgent need uh, to promote transdisciplinarity for an overall development. And I would like to cite an example, particularly referring to the statements of Dr. Giri. Sir was saying uh, about transdisciplinary discipline and being the students of literature. I would like to highlight few names, particularly the great poet from Odisha, Jayant Mahapatra. He is a physicist by profession. So after getting a retirement, after being retired, his full from his service, he switched to writing poetry, and now in the field of poetry, he is a great name in India. Uh, and a new name everybody knows, Amish Tripathi, for his Shiva trilogy, Rama trilogy, and many. He is a banker by profession, and now he is a famous person in the field of literature. And particularly to the young audience, everybody knows Chetan Bhagat. He is an engineer and then a manager. So, and all the novels he wrote became blockbuster, maybe in form of their text, and then when a biopic, means a movie, was made on them. So if people are concerned, having people will have a concern to study other disciplines without any biasness, without any reservation, definitely they will uh, be able to do their best in different field. So
Thank,
I am completely agreeing with the presentation of Dr. Giri that it was fabulous, and it opened a new aura and horizon for thinking and going ahead for transdisciplinary research and development. Thank you so much, sir.
thank you, Dr. Tiwari. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to invite Miniti Pradhan to kindly share her view.
Hello. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year to all. So, as usual, it is like no, Ananta Bhai's presentation is really very deep and very intelligent presentation. I have been noting so many things. So probably I'm not qualified to discuss all these things, but among that few things, I would like to just share. When he was telling about listening, I just remembered a long back I read one article. Listening only to the words is not the thing you should do. I was just reading that article few years back probably. In that, somebody was describing that one mute person, when he went for plowing the field, the other person said, the landlord, he said that, no, you should not plow. It is dry season. He said, no, it is going to rain after 1 or 2 days. He said, it is fully bright sunlight is there, and night also I see the clear sky. How do you say that? He says, anyway, I feel that it is going to rain after some day. I mean, 1 or 2 days. Then it really rained. In that it was written, probably he was a mute person, so his feeling and his intuition, what you say, intuition, that probably told him that it is going to rain. And after reading that, no, I started noticing in and around how do the animals, the birds, they behave. Some particular bird at the night, 3 o'clock, 3:30, they will start, they will start doing things. So those are the clues we are missing as a human being, and we don't get the clue of what is happening to our own body and around. So listening means, no, in yoga and all, they say that listening to your body is the first thing you are supposed to do. Then you can listen to others, not only the words and the, we can listen to the body language, the way the environment is, and all these things. So, and about the transdisciplinary, the rigidity happens because that, no, I know all attitude. And in our society, and that mostly in the educated society, it has been given importance the person who has a expert tag to that. Once you learn different things, you definitely grow, but you may or may not become expert. That is the, they say in Hindi something is there, no, Sabjanta is not expert in any particular thing. To cultivate that culture, that we should listen to everything with open heart, and I think some more practice, as Tiwari sir said, that new education policy, actually they have started that one, but that to implement that to the grassroots level and get the acceptability, it might take some time. Then I want to just ask Anant Bhai, how do we keep the balance between that? Means learn everything till become expert in one thing. Because I find to double my hand in everything, in and around, like to learn and things. How do you do that? We do that. And thank you.
Thank you, Minitiji.
And
Now,
I will, at the end, if you have time, I would
sure.
like to recite a poem, for New Year.
Okay, yes, we'll invite you. We'll invite you.
Thank you.
So, any other respected participant? Okay, then I have also some concern. Because I am actually I'm going to problematize the issue, like how transdisciplinary could be a path of development of epistemological trust, I would say. Because the best research, if you can see in history, never ever done in their fields, be it Darwin, be it Pavlov, be it Sigmund Freud. So I am trying to underline the ideology of discipline, how that ideology subjugates individual, for that matter. I'm a sociologist, but I have problem with classical sociologists. They ignored the psychological insights, be it Emile Durkheim, be it Auguste Comte. So, and we can see in contemporary sociology, they cherished psychological insights, be it in American sociology for that matter. They understood. So I think in sociology, in classical sociology, I would say, there is a kind of hatred, I would not use the word, but ignorance of psychological fact. And that is the very problematic aspect of classical sociology. Another thing is disciplinary, antagonism between the disciplines, for that matter. the conflict between economist and sociologist for that matter. Even within field, with reference to methodology, there is a two kind of categorization. One is Delhi School of Economics, one is JNU. And there is a conflict between also American sociology and British sociology. British sociology obsessed with ethnography. There are many dimensions of society or reality which cannot be understood with ethnographical theme. But because they have kind of obsession, they ignored aesthetical facts. And another thing is like transdisciplinary cannot be built with marginalization of philosophy. There is a marginalization of philosophy in all disciplines, be it philosophy, be it economics, be it sociology, and be it, for that matter, anthropology. Of course, we are trying to build epistemological trust, but how can we cherish? Of course, there is just so many, big thing like now education policy implemented, but the teachers who teach sociology, they are very having narrow understanding towards a kind of I would say intellectual untouchability, right? And that was being highlighted by M.N. Roy, who once said that social science is suffering from the diseases of determinism. How we can, overcome with diseases of determinism, So these are my concern. So my question is like how we can build. What are the things that we have to unlearn if we want to develop transdisciplinary orientation of knowledge or transdisciplinary thing? Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, dear Randhir. And that how the new year is giving us gift of very deep thinking. And all friends co-present, Gyan Luigi and Dr. Tiwari, Minati and Randhir, we have brought so many deep insights to our conversation. Beginning with Randhir, when you say that how do we really unlearn? And this unlearning reminds us of Ivan Illich, who talks about deschooling society. And Ivan Illich also wrote a book on conviviality. It's called Tools for Conviviality. I think the whole process of unlearning and new learning, it calls for new spaces of conviviality. We would have to be together because modern knowledge system began with isolation and fragmentation. As you very rightly mentioned, classical sociology not paying enough attention to psychology. But once we create a condition of festivity, like something like the New Year festival or Deepavali, let us have a Deepavali of disciplines, and and in which 100 lamps bloom in the golden temple, in which our heart becomes a golden temple of Deepavali of knowledge. And therefore, determinism of discipline has to be transformed into an ecology of co-determination. For example, psychology, sociology, economics, and philosophy, they're contributing a path of understanding. So from determinism to, we would have to come to paths of co-creation and co-understanding. And you are so right. By bringing philosophy here, this sentence of yours is deeply significant, that transdisciplinarity cannot happen with marginalization of philosophy. But what is the meaning of philosophy? Because if we, by bringing philosophy, if we mean only Euro-American philosophy, and then that is only a first step. I would like to submit that we would have to bring many pathways of the philosophical. And in my essay, I refer to, for example, Vedanta, Ubuntu, quantum physics, which has its own tradition of non-duality. So therefore, philosophy also becomes planetarized by bringing many philosophies to our conversation. And the theme of ecology of trust is really what you call as epistemological trust is a very, very important thing. In my paper, there is a section on epistemology and ontology which I didn't refer to. But the whole question of trust is so significant because we would have to create not only an epistemological trust, but we would also have to create an ecology of trust of epistemology. That means that if as a sociologist I have been trained to trust in something like social structure or ethnography or statistics, the point you're referring to, but then we have to create an ecology of trust, epistemological insights, then we start trusting each other. Therefore, trust is very significant. And as we know on the work on trust, trust is not just a sociological process. It is a multidimensional process, including the spiritual dimension of trust. Now with Menotti, yes, the question of that how when we listen to many disciplines or many things, how we can still have a certain of depth knowledge about one or two things. Now this is a very important challenge, but the analogy I would also think of is love, for example, Now intimate love gives primacy to one person, but that does not mean that we are not able to, our loving relationship also includes many. Similarly, the whole depth dimension with a person that we have, many times it is facilitated by the width of loving relation that we have with others. So therefore, depth and breadth. Now it is not easy. It seems it is not easy, and of course, the depth work requires a particular concentration, and the width work, if I have to spread out, it also requires a particular kind of concentration. So in the whole practice of learning, we would have to develop simultaneously the concentration of depth and a concentration of wideness. It seems not easy, but as we, life is a sadhana of practice, as we start doing one step in one step, and slowly, it would become more and more easier. And then Dr. Tiwari, thank you for your thoughts and your reference to Jayanta Mahapatra, he's a great poet and he's a physicist, and above, he's a loving person. I would like to give you this example that I have dedicated my last book of poems, Weaving New Hats, to Jayanti Babu, and I sent him a copy of my book, and he wrote at the age of 92 or so in his own hand. Now, what a beautiful letter he wrote. He says in Odia that ମୋ ଭଳି ଗୋଟେ ଅଯୋଗ୍ୟ ଲୋକକୁ ତୁମର ଏତେ ସୁନ୍ଦର ବହିଟା କଣ ପାଇଁ ତୁମେ ଉତ୍ସର୍ଗ କଲ? It means such an incapable person like myself, a non-worthy person like myself, why you have dedicated this book? Therefore, the humility, that great sense of love and humility, and he sent me two of his very beautiful collection of books of poems. I would humbly preserve that letter of Jayanta Mahapatra, for all ages to come. Therefore, people like Jayanta Babu and many others, they embody a living humility, which is really the source of transdisciplinarity. And with that living humility, they're able to cross so many boundaries, and they become a living and loving example for all of us. And with Gyan Luigi, yes, so very important that, when we engage, he says, very important thought he makes, that when we engage with mainly the thinkers of the past, who were themselves so transdisciplinary, therefore transdisciplinarity is very important. At the same time, and what Ganluigi is telling, that when we are engaging with a contemporary thinker like Amartya Sen, And he very creatively, reading Amartya Sen also as a theologian, in the sense that as a scholar of religion or deep religious insights. And that is so insightful of Gyan Luigi to read Amartya Sen also as a theologian, because in Amartya Sen's work, for example, his latest book, A Home in the World, which is memoir, such a profound dialogue between, for example, the social contract tradition and the whole aspects of Buddhism and other religious traditions, where Amartya Sen is saying, that while social contract gives emphasis on contract, but in many traditions such as Buddhism, what is important is not contract, what you can give me or what I can give you, but unconditional love. And therefore, so I think these are some of the thoughts that that got stimulated by listening to your very deep conversations. Please.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we are also running out of the time, so it's time to invite Miniti Pradhanji to kindly share her New Year poem, and then Tiwari sir.
And now maybe you can switch on your video.
Yes.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. 1 minute. Yeah. I'm visible, I believe now.
Yes.
Visible. Yeah. Happy New Year to all. So it might seem it is very, last 2 days back only I wrote it. So I thought I will share it. Actually, it is like a new beginning. It may seem like, very personal, like stealing the spark from your eyes when the world mocks at you, fading the glow from your face and gives more than you can chew. Stealing the spark from your eyes when the world mocks at you, fading the glow from your face and gives more than you can chew. Word of the silent killer who slowly puts off the fire. Remember, you are a fighter. Inside you, there is a superpower. So, water the inner garden. Let the rays of light, let the rays light you up again. Pick up the broken pieces and start all over again. Glow with the consciousness. Love more yourself more than you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is
Thank you.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Tiwari, you are requested to kindly offer vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me this opportunity. It's my honor and privilege to extend the vote of thanks on this August moment. And really, we are fortunate to be part of this great conversation. And in that order, I would like to express my deep felt gratitude on behalf of uh, Raffles University and SOHSS for co-learning. I would like to express my deep felt gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Professor Kumar Giri sir, for his brilliant presentation in a very smooth way. Sir highlighted so many aspects of transdisciplinary learning by citing Dante, by reciting poems from Sri Aurobindo's poetry, philosophy, that Savitri, and by quoting uh, the importance of transdisciplinary communication by citing the importance of language, and all together talking about the importance of transdisciplinary learning to to bring a harmonious society, so that people of coming generation can do their best by going ahead, by learning so many things. They will not be narrowed down with a particular subject. So thank you so much, sir, for your kind presence and brilliant presentation. Entire organizing committee is dipping its head in your respect. Thank you so much, sir. Next, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Dr. Gyan Louis Gee, sir, for his active presence and citing very apt and relevant observation and questions. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to express my deep gratitude to Minati Pradhanji for reciting their beautiful poem and presenting her very apt observation which she made from the presentation of our honorable distinguished speaker. I would like to express my deep gratitude to all honorable participants from all over the world for their presence, maintaining patience, and making it successful. Last but not the least, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the convener of this program, Professor Randhir Kumar Gautam, for organizing and making it successful. Thank you so much, sir. So finally, my regards and thank you. Namaste.
And thank you to you as well. And Happy New Year.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Next
you.
week
Thank you.
probably I'll join from Bangalore only.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.